Awesome. All right. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for an agroforestry farmer panel. I'm Nancy LaRoe. I'm from NOFA, Vermont. I'm on the Farmer Services Team Organic Practices Program. And I'm really happy to kind of facilitate a conversation among some agroforestry farmers. Wanted to start off first with just like a show of hands of how many people are already engaged in what you consider agroforestry, just to get a That's good. And of those, like less than 3 years, or less than 3 years and more than 3 years. Oh, nice, awesome. All right, just gives us an idea of where we're at. All right. Well, I'm really happy to have some farms share what they've been up to see kind of context of what agroforestry looks like in our region. And I think I will start with some backgrounds so that you can hear a little bit about their farms and get like the context and placement. So and I'll introduce them one by one and you can share a little bit about your farms. So we'll start with John Obrien. Let me advance my slide. Oop, wrong, too many. Winnicott Farm. John, can you share a little bit about your farm?
My name's John O'Brien from Winnicott River Farm in Stratham down here. Down in Stratham, New Hampshire, on the southeast by the seacoast. Forgive me, I have a little bit of imposter syndrome. In my past life, I'm used to giving briefs and lectures, but this is the first time where I'm probably the dumbest person in the room on the subject that I'm talking about. But I'm here mainly because we converted about 25 acres from overgrown pasture, more technically than woods. But about 50 years ago, they let it go, and I got a little greedy, and I wanted that land back. So I just figured, hey, if I cut down the trees, but leave some for shade, then I'll have more pasture land for the cows and have some shade. So that was the impetus behind our conversion, as you say. So we bought in a forester. I told him what I wanted to accomplish. He marked each individual tree on whether or not we're going to take it or leave it. And then a big forestry company came in, took out all the trees, and converted. That was in October of 2020. And it was mostly no money out of my pocket was the goal. So they probably did $250,000 worth of work.
Hey, John, can I interrupt? Can we just do a snapshot of like your farm? And we're going to dive in with photos.
Okay.
So we can have photos go with that. Okay. No, that'd be so great.
65 acres. We raise beef, pork, lamb, and poultry on our farm in New Hampshire.
Great. Because I have photos to go with that conversation. That will be much better. Excellent. Next, Noah Simon.
Hey guys, my name is Noah. I've been farming with Red Tree Farms in Mount Bronson Valley for about 5 years. We are totally dedicated to agroforestry. We manage about 800 acres. All the silvopasture that we're doing for the most part is additive silvopasture. So we're converting conventional dairy land, which in our county is like in a process of a lot of dairy land is being retired. So conventional corn, some soy, and a lot of hay fields into organic nut and fruit orchard silvopastures. Our primary crop as an enterprise is organic chestnuts and chestnut flower, but we're also working with a number of other perennial crops that have stable food potential. So crops like hickory as an olive oil alternative, oaks for acorn flour, sea berry as a nutrient-dense citrus alternative, and a couple other kinds of nuts. We graze sheep on pasture. Our partners, Elizabeth and Brad, I think Liz might be here. Yeah, over here, graze red Angus beef cattle in our oldest chestnut orchard, which is a lease on their land. And we also keep bees, produce honey, produce maple syrup, and are doing a bunch of research into what some people call intensive silvopasture systems, which is basically like the intentional growing perennial plants for the purpose of feeding animals.
Great. Damon?
All right, so I'm Daimon Meeh. I have doing two things. Well, a few more than that, but so I work. My day job is with New Hampshire NRCS State Grazing Specialist. I'm also I'll mention here and there about the Northeast Climate Hub. I'm the NRCS co-lead for the Northeast Climate Hub as well. In my free time, my wife and I run Meeh 3 Farm, which is just custom grazing. Animals go away in the winter, which is really handy for stretches like we've been having recently. We've been at it 5 years now, and just continually expanding. We last year had 38 young stock, and hoping to continue to expand, have about 50 or so this coming year. I got in, really wanted to do this because I wanted to be able to have, well, I love grazing management. Anyone that's talked to me for a little bit will know that. But I also wanted the pain points and practical knowledge that goes along with it. And so as we at NRCS started also doing a lot more in this region with silvopasture, I decided, well, I need to try it. So we picked out some suitable sites and are working on doing some conversion at this point.
Great. So I just wanted to frame kind of the overarching conversation of like, what is agroforestry? It can mean a lot of things. I have the USDA definition up there, but also wanted to acknowledge that it is based in, millennia of practices by indigenous cultures, and just acknowledging like, this is not new. We're putting some new names to it and trying different things, but not new. All right. So now what I'd love to hear is kind of what your all's definition of silvopasture is, what it looks like on your farms, and kind of how you've developed your systems. So John, now.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, just we just not really trying to get into silvopasturing per se. We just wanted to have more cheap, free land in essence, with but use it as shade, which is probably looked frowned upon by the silvopasture gurus, but that's how we started. And but then the more we get into it, we obviously need to keep an eye on compaction on the roots, how long the cows are there, what's the grazing structure look like, and so on and so forth. And I'm still just developing a plan for how do we propagate the next generation of trees that are going to replace any that die or fall over or so forth, while the cows are in there and rotating around for that. So that's why I'm here to learn as well. But as far as the silvopasture aspect, it's really a shaded pasture is the way I'm viewing it right now.
Great. So I'm just showing a few pictures of your actual.
Yeah. So that's that's kind of what it looked like beforehand. That's a skidder had just come through there, but I think, yeah, that's a skidder in the background, not the cows. That's the slash afterwards, which is obviously a big problem when you're trying to reestablish grasses and pasture. And tackling that is one of the big issues. And then this is just me introducing the cows into the slash. Obviously, they're not eating a lot there, but they are disturbing it a little bit. I give them access to the grass on the right there, and hopefully they're fertilizing my future grasses there on the left. And this is after just, I think, the first year. I don't think the date is on there, but we did no amendments, no lime, no seed, no anything except for cow impact. And obviously that's not the most ideal, but that for my wallet, that was the easiest for me to do. But that grass, that soil did not see, and I'm not talking a photon of sunlight for 50 years. It was that thick over cover. So as soon as that saw sun and moisture, it just started coming in on its own. That's either a heritage seed bank, or I did roll out hay in there in the winter time while I was feeding the cows in there. There's a before, so the big patch of woods right in between those pastures right there. That was mainly what we're after. It goes all the way up to the barn in the north, and then there should be an after from 2 years later. That's that same wooded area. We took out I would say 90% of the pines and about 10% of the hardwoods, and left the opposite, obviously. And then this is what it is just a month ago. This was December, so obviously the grass has stopped growing, but this is deep in that wooded area, and you could see kind of the cows are loving a nice day back there. I didn't even roll out hay yet. They're eating grass. They were in there for probably 12 hours, and I moved them just a little bit to the north, and it looked the same. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
Great. Any questions? I feel like we can hold to the end. If there's any burning questions, we can feel free to raise your hand. How's that sound?
The only mechanical stuff we bought in, so obviously the cows would be spraining their ankles if they had ankles here a couple of years ago, but I got a forestry mulcher in to take care of the slash, but when I got it there, it was borrowed, so I knew I was limited in the amount of time I had with it. So I just kind of touched a stump, a big 48-inch diameter pasture pine there, and it just kind of disintegrated. So I thought my time was better spent. I'll worry about the slash later. I could pick it up myself or hopefully borrow the forestry mulcher again. But I thought my time was better spent getting rid of those stumps. And I'm talking thousands of stumps, not exaggerating. So that I forestry mulched all the stumps away, left the slash there. And after now 5 or 6 years, most of that slash is either incorporated into the soil, or I just kind of raked it into harrows, and it's either going to stay there as habitat, or maybe compost into soil, or eventually I'll just, if I get the forestry mulcher, I just have to mulch the harrow of, or not the harrow, the windrow. Thank you. Jeez. The windrow of the slash that's kind of every 200 feet in my pasture.
That's great. So you've been bale grazing?
I have mostly, bale grazing this week because I can't get my side-by-side back there, but I try to roll out my hay so that they graze without competition. So bale grazing, probably 20% of the bales, and the rest are rolled out in a carpet, just to spread more seed.
Excellent. All right. Amen.
So, as I mentioned, I'm just working on some establishment now, but what I have done is been using the cows a little bit on the field edge to kind of start an early stage of, I will probably thin some of the trees eventually in here, but have some bittersweet issues along the edge of the field. And so this is when I let them in, plenty of nice grass. Look where they are, chowing down on the bittersweet. And this is about 24 hours later. They took out all the bittersweet, and then I can go in and cut a lot of the vines, like some of the ones that are climbing. It's a lot easier to see. So I guess one point that I'd like to make in regards to this is agroforestry practices aren't. You should think of them as a transition. It's not. I'm gonna create a silvopasture and be done in a year. It's a longer term transition to have it be effective. So like in these situations, like this is an edge of a field as well. There's probably about 40 feet of woods included. There's a skid trail just into the woods there, so again, an area that was invaded with bittersweet. I'm having them help me clear out the understory so that I can more easily go in and thin those trees afterwards, and see which trees are able to recover from the bittersweet impacts as well. And so I don't have any great pictures of there's about a 2.5 acre section that I'm working on clearing, just finishing clearing at the moment. I wanted to make sure I picked an appropriate site, well drained, not wet soils, which is a frequent misstep that I see a lot of people have if you don't want wet soils in silvopasture. And so it's kind of a nice knoll. It is right near a wetlands, but we'll have adequate buffer and everything. And I chose this site as well because we had a whole bunch of roughly like 36 to a little over 40-inch diameter white pines, 120 foot tall. Really good marketable timber. The markets were okay right now. So in all, at the stage we're at right now, it's been a profitable progression or project at the moment. There's a lot of trees that came down though, a lot of slash, and that all the extra work that's going to go along with that is going to change that picture. But when you're going in and choosing these locations, it's important to think of you know how it can be how it's going to cash flow, right? So yeah, so I just you can go to my last picture here. I just threw in some pictures of just my general management, just so we could have some decent pictures. But I'm hoping to have some pictures. Maybe next time you see me, I'll have some pictures to show you of the progression of it. And in this area, I'm doing a little bit something different. I'm hoping to plant a variety of native plants, native warm season grasses, and forbs, because I'm wanting to try. I believe it will be easier to establish the native warm season grasses than cool season grasses, especially in our context with lower pH soils and lower nutrient soils. It's more suitable for native warm season grasses, as opposed to going in and trying to hammer it with lime and other nutrients to get it to where cool season grasses would actually be okay. So I think that's it for my whole approach there. Oh, I guess the other thing when I was going through and selecting trees to keep, worked with a great logger that was he's getting close to retirement and was willing to, he give me a call. Well, I got 2 trees down today, and that's about it. And so he, he took time, took care, dropping those tall pines with huge crowns. Had the potential to do a lot of damage. He minimized it a lot. But when I was selecting trees, I was trying to find good diversity of species, good diversity of age, and just as well as like the good spacing of the trees, to get down to a lot thinner than what most people think. So you want about 40-ish square feet of basal area per acre as like an upper level when you're going to thin, because you're going to have those crowns fill out, the remaining crowns fill out a lot more and get more shade in there, which that looks like a very sparse park if you think about that in terms of tree population, which a lot of people think aren't familiar with that sparse of a density when they're thinking silvopasture. So did I cover everything that I was supposed to?
You're the expert. You haven't talked about shade. I mean,
yeah. So a goal of having the fence in the woods in like this field, that bittersweet patch is maybe right about here. That's for shade, but also that silvopasture area that I'm establishing. There's another one that I'm working on a little slower because it's junk wood in there, so I'm just taking firewood out here and there. I want to have some relief valve areas during really hot stretches of the summer, to be able to rotate the animals through there and have enough space so that they don't have to be there for longer than a day or two before moving on, to avoid over impact.
those areas. Yeah.
This might be a dumb question.
No such thing.
In a hypothetical situation where you wanted your animals to have shade in a silvopasture, but you didn't thin it and you just left it, what would happen?
If so, basically animals in the woods.
Yes, yes.
You wouldn't really have any herbaceous forage for the animals. Depending on how you managed the animals in there, you could damage the trees pretty quickly. And then you would end up with dead trees in there. It would end up kind of thinning itself, but maybe not in the way that you want it to thin. What's that? Yeah, yeah, it would thin itself on your head. Yeah, you know, the trees would fall and yeah, it would, I don't necessarily recommend that. So.
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have
Cool.
time.
You're establishing the warm season grasses and forbs under the trees, like where you're thinning, and they're
Yep.
fine to grow in the shade.
So that, I mean, it's the shade is spread out, and so that's why you need to really thin it down significantly. So really, actually, that 40 square feet per acre, that's more for cool season grasses. You're looking at like maybe 25 to 30 for warm season grasses. But I started with the 40 square feet per acre because I knew some trees were going to get damaged as the big pines were coming down. So then I could go through and take out ones that did get damaged. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
What's your plan for maintaining that 40 square feet as those trees mature and die off?
Yeah, so harvesting for firewood. So the trees I selected for hardwoods. So probably just firewood in that area. It's not a big enough area for any sort of major timber sale with the trees that I have there now. Now that those pines are gone.
And will you be replanting?
Potentially. So I think I'll wait and see how things shake out with the trees that are left. But there are a few areas that are some bigger gaps where he tried to fall, you know, he knew he was going to take out some trees, so he tried to drop a bunch of them in the same spot. Also, that helps with cleanup of the slash. But there are some areas that are pretty wide open. And so I may look to plant a little bit here and there, also for adding potential more diversity. Yeah.
For both of you guys, with you already mentioned they liked the bittersweet. Were there any other preferential browse with resprouts, like any species of trees that really stood out to you?
First, before I forget, I want to mention in this area that I'm clearing, I was also paying attention to the invasive pressure in the understory and nearby surrounding area, because once you open up light, you need to be ready to combat those invasives. So you gotta be really ready for that, especially if there's high invasive pressure. There are some other areas that I've been thinking of, but there's bittersweet, you know, tendrils all in the understory just waiting for sunlight, and I'm not ready to take that on just yet. So in terms of like tree preferential browse.
Yeah, but you know, like with yours, tons comes back. Any
Yeah.
observational stuff of what they liked, what they didn't like.
I didn't really observe because the way I managed the cows, there was not a lot of forage in there in the beginning, so I just kind of let them access it, and I thought they were going back there for shade. I really didn't observe them eating any shoots or anything, but I will second, you know, my plan is to keep that buckthorn down. And the picture of the grass you saw, that may have been after I set the bush hog at like 14 inches to stay above the grass, but just to knock that the common invasives that are coming back, common buckthorn and the like, and the bittersweet. Because I know if I don't stay on top of that, it's just going to look the same as it did after 50 years of neglect.
One more question, and then we need to keep
Well,
going.
just, so your cattle are prioritizing buckthorn.
Bittersweet.
I'm sorry, bittersweet.
Yep.
My bovine does prioritize buckthorn too, but the only one that seems to be challenging for cattle are there, they will control it, you don't have to worry about that when you're grazing it.
So yes, if like in the silvopasture, if you're managing it, yes,
The cattle are going in.
right,
They're
right.
not
So
gonna
if
go that high.
if you are ready to manage it and ready to graze in there, then that's fine. I do see in my NRCS job, I do see people take on projects a lot of times and aren't ready for the next step. And so like I'm even a little nervous about, am I gonna be able to clean up all the slash that's out there in time to do some planting this late May, early June? Because it's I didn't get out there before the snow, and he wasn't completely done logging, so I don't know if I'm gonna have enough time to clean up that slash. So if that ends up, that may end up meaning that I don't get animals in this year, which could be a problem.
Well, but as long as it doesn't climb into the tree canopies.
Sure,
again,
sure. Yep.
Your cattle will catch up on it once they
Yep.
get there. I know other places that cattle are prioritizing.
Yeah.
Bittersweet for
Yep.
sure, buckthorn probably.
Yeah.
Whereas, like I said, a little
Yeah.
bit harder to access. Certain cattle do control it and others don't.
Yeah, and I will just mention, I haven't noticed any preferential browse really, rows they don't hit too much, but I've, you know, in those field edges, I've got all sorts of different trees. They do really love poplar. They readily eat beech. They, you know, really, you know, the whole browse, you know, it's a uniform browse line across all the species that I have in the field edge.
It's
So,
just super interesting you do it your way because you can tell like they're in the grass or if they're still hitting the woods.
Yeah.
Like, they must like that.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and oftentimes when I move them into a pasture, whether it's that much bittersweet or not, they go, and it has a field edge, they go for the field edge.
Just to add something, a resource, Steve Gabriel, who's a silvopasture farmer and sheep raiser in western, or kind of central western New York, wrote a book called Silvopasture and published a SARE study in the last 5 years that was looking at the feed value of common northeast woody perennial invasives like Eurasian buckthorn and honeysuckle, and basically demonstrated that the feed value per gram, or however you want to measure it, is like 2 to 3 times grass.
So I just finished a final report that isn't okay yet, but you get it from me or wait for a week or something, I'll post it. But so SARE 24-083. So there's like, I don't know, 20 more species than what Steve Gabriel covered.
Oh, cool.
And a lot
In your
more.
study?
My study it was a rider on my animal trials from the leaf separator and trees and shrubs field edge harvest one that was 2022. During that one, I applied for another, so it's like 30,000. You know, another farmer grant totally on the lab result. And I tried to, because I called a bunch of people, but they had a great line up here. So anyway, they didn't fit me. Maybe in 2 years and by then I'll have the tannin stuff back from Wayne Zeller, who's at the U.S. Dairy Forage Research Center, who's actually identified structures of tannins and all those things.
I think
But-
she knows more about palatability by species in the region than anybody else in the
That's
region.
true. For me, might not apply for them. But yeah, so yeah, and in that, like, so you said you're growing some things to also eat the trees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about
And in yours, do you have opportunities where some of them have 3-inch cuts that could be made to keep those canopies more reachable, like to keep some as ongoing trees with canopy control? So rock fodder in the grass lawn periods or whatever,
Yeah,
give them that field edge
Yeah,
benefit after they've completely devoured your tree line.
yeah.
Your
So-
edge
So,
canopy.
so I do potentially have some trees that I could like hinge cut or pollard
Yeah,
or.
so don't go to Steve Gabriel's silvopasture book, go to Mark Krawczyk's pollarding chapter, because he let me edit that, and Steve didn't look at any pollarding literature. He made up that hinging thing based on deer literature for feeding deer in an emergency, and it's not the way to start a pollard in any other literature. So just go to Mark Krawczyk's for pollarding directions.
Yep.
Sorry.
So my point is, I haven't that hasn't
Great,
been, that hasn't been a focus of mine to try and find that at the moment.
But don't
Yeah, so.
Okay, I want to make sure we have time for all of the
Okay.
context.
Yes.
sorry.
We'll have time for questions.
What am I?
It's good to have conversation. So if you, what your definition of agroforestry is and what it looks like on your farm and why you are developing these systems. It's a pretty big question.
I don't know. I think it's like something basically like if you were to try to forget for a moment about what you've learned about what good animal farming looks like and just try to actually imagine what would be the best way we could raise animals based on all history of how humans have done it and based on ecological observation of how healthy ecosystems function and based on looking at the study of the animals we want to raise. And then there's like a huge amount of imagining and discovery and trial that needs to happen in the next generation to figure out what that looks like in our region. But I can say I feel pretty confident that it is not continuous hundreds of acres of grass only. Be sure that it involves shrubs and trees. So I'm gonna share a couple of examples of that. And it's super cool that you're here because I've been looking forward to meeting you.
That was such a great verbalization.
Well, the kind of silvopasture that we do now is something that I'm not actually that excited about. I think it's like just cracking the surface, and I have to try like not to mod what we do too much. But this is like a very simple kind of additive silvopasture where you're planting perennial crop trees into fields and establishing diverse pasture and doing rotational grazing of ruminants between the trees. Like you could do that with a wide range of different crop trees. We're doing it mostly with chestnuts and hickories and some oaks that we're breeding. But in that kind of system, basically, like the animals are eating the herbaceous forage, benefiting from the shade of the trees. Like the shade of the trees is having a net positive impact on the herbaceous forage, resiliency to drought, and those kinds of things. It's obviously reducing animal stress, but like that's kind of the extent of the symbiosis. Is the animals are fertilizing the trees are providing shade to the animals, and there's two enterprises happening in the same place, right? I think like to me the future that I'm super excited about, and that is what made me want to come here and talk to everybody, is just to invite people to be excited about that and maybe find opportunities to contribute to the huge spectrum of research that I think needs to be done. Is how can we be developing more diverse and complex polycultural agroecosystems in which there are more complex and cyclical relationships between animals and perennial plants that are producing leaf fodder and producing masting fodder. And there's a lot of pretty compelling examples from China and from other places in the world.
And there's a lot of other people's work on my website,
Yeah.
Europe, et cetera.
Yeah, there's a lot of really compelling evidence that the potential delta in what can be accomplished in terms of ecological function, in terms of meat production, in terms of water quality and carbon sequestration, and all of the myriad ecological markers that I think a lot of people in this room care about. The delta that can be achieved as we move towards more complex perennial feed and fodder systems compared to like even a baseline of what we would all think of as good grazing is a huge delta. It's a much larger delta than I think most people would expect.
There's also a lot of benefits that we're only guessing upon that are surely there but haven't been researched yet.
Yeah.
As far as like compounds that pass into the milk or the meat.
For sure.
From all those amazing food qualities that we hardly know anything about that make the milk keep longer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anti-cancer, all these health benefits, healthcare is expensive.
Yeah.
People think it's expensive, but they'll pay way more for healthcare than you have healthcare.
Yeah, you're totally
From these trees and bushes. And maybe get reimbursed a bit for that extra layer of labor that is always there.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
I agree. I'm gonna just really quickly share a couple of things that I find like inspire, maybe hopefully will inspire folks to consider some of the potential here. This is just looking at like increasing diversity in the herbaceous layer. So just like adding forbs to a pasture before you're even talking about woody perennials. The Vienna experiment, which was done in Germany, basically was studying side by side plots of monoculture pastures versus all different kinds of species combinations with just herbaceous species, and showed massive improvements in fungal and microbial diversity, triple the carbon sequestration, almost triple the rate of topsoil development, 50% more pollinators, 50% lower pest pressure, the list goes on. This is just 16 plus species of herbaceous plants. No second stratum, right? You could go.
Are these in any order?
They are, but I don't think that one matters. This is looking at what we might call intensive silvopasture systems in other climates. Eric Tonsmeyer's book, The Carbon Farming Solution, has some really interesting data on some of these systems. So these are, systems that have been adopted on tens of thousands of acres in the tropics in Colombia and Mexico, where they're intentionally planting leguminous trees, nitrogen fixing, rapid regeneration trees that have high feed value and can basically be managed cyclically in a very similar dynamic as what a lot of people in this room are familiar with grass, but just at a scale that's like much larger than grass in terms of the metabolism of the plants that are being browsed and dumping organic material back into the earth. And just go back one sec, Nancy.
Yeah.
So, in some of these systems that are integrating both cut and come again leaf fodder, in this case, they're using a species called Lucana, which is a leguminous tree species that we can't grow here, but we have some analogs I'll talk about. They were increasing stocking densities and meat yields between 2 and 10x while improving water quality, massively improving carbon sequestration, improving wildlife habitat. It's a different atmosphere than what we think is possible. And I don't think that it's likely that we could achieve exactly the same thing here, because the net primary productivity, obviously, in a cold temperate climate is different. Yeah, everything's slower, probably needs to be spaced out. But if we could accomplish a quarter of that, that would be revolutionary. Like, think about what it would mean for the economics of ecological grazing if you could double your stocking density while improving all the ecological outcomes you care about. Okay, I guess I'll just talk about on the next slide. This is a false indigo bush. It's like one interesting example of a analog species for that Lucana, a fast-growing leguminous woody forage. These are a couple of examples on the left. I think that's 2-year regrowth with Sam. Sam's like 6'2". So just giving you a sense of like how quickly these can produce a huge amount of biomass. And these are leguminous. So imagine this is like a 15-foot tall clover kind of. So you're like adding a third dimension to the food that your land can produce.
And a lot of shade.
Yeah, and some shade. If you go to the next slides, I just remember this and put this in at lunch. So this guy named Robert Marsh, now we're kind of moving from like our analogs in tropical settings into people who are actually doing it on this continent. This guy added a 16-foot wide hedge of Amorpha fruticosa, that false indigo bush. And he is seeing the same amount of grazing days in that 16-foot wide hedge as in the 100-foot wide grass pasture immediately next door. So that's like over 6 times the feed value per square foot. And this is just like one layer. Like, this is a really simple kind of addition, right?
So
What's
that
the
one,
frequency?
he wishes he did it about 10 feet wider, but both for the production, because a friend of mine that worked for Missouri, the forester for Missouri NRCS, was involved in this and talked to me about it a lot. Really, really cool success story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a little bit too narrow for managing the animals as well.
I think so. And that's why a lot of this, like, we need more people to be testing these things, because like the concepts are are there and kind of like indisputable. It's just about figuring out the establishment patterns, figuring out the right species, figuring out the spacing, figuring out the frequency of disturbance regimes and these kinds of things. I think that they saw a 10x increase in soil organic carbon in that strip in 10 years, something like that, maybe 5 years, I can't remember. I'm not an actual scientist, but it's really, it's like just enough to say, okay, this is really worth considering if you actually care about what's the optimized potential for animal health and overall agroecological productivity.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
They calculated land equivalency ratio of that model. That's model.
Did the NRCS in that case?
Yes.
Sorry,
I don't know.
can you just repeat the question also?
Oh, sorry.
The question is, they calculate the land equivalency ratio of the model that is more densified with more trees, more food, more people.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, do they calculate the land equivalency? They may have. I'm not aware of what that is, but they may have. I know they were looking at it. Joe Alley that worked on this ended up for a short time being the national agroforester before we slimmed down our staff.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really important research to study what is the answer, what are all the possible answers to that question in terms of different hedge spacing and like what's the optimal canopy structure. You want to?
Do you know what their frequency of putting it into that leguminous shrub?
I don't.
We're going completely off script here, so I'm just gonna like run with like, is there, because you have some really more interesting slides. You want to keep talking about it, or do you want to?
I can share this one other
Yeah.
thing, or you want to go ahead?
No, I don't know the rest time, but I think it was about 3 times a year.
Yep.
Is what he's put in there.
Yeah, and that might be a little. You might find that's a little different on for Vermont. Yeah. But, I just included a slide here. This is like one other thing like, to get people excited about is honey locust silvopasture is another, like Jared was saying, that launched like gateway drug kind of option. That's been like decently studied a little bit in the United States. These are native leguminous trees that produce sugar and protein rich bean pods and also produce a very dappled shade while sequestering nitrogen, right? So like Virginia Tech did a study looking at basically like the additionality of honey locust, simple honey locust silvopasture, just adding honey locusts to established pasture. And they found that around 50% canopy cover, basically the herbaceous layer of the pasture produced like a small but meaningful amount more, was more resilient to drought, was more palatable, and then the trees are also adding like about doubling the total feed value of the herbaceous layer in beans in the early winter, right? So it's like it's in a very simple system in Pennsylvania, people are like doubling the feed value per acre just with a simple overlay of improved honey locust. There's some details to understand. They're hardy in zone 5. Very few of them are hardy in zone 4, so that's important to understand. The thorniness is an important thing. I'm not trying to present this to anybody like shill you honey locust, but just it's another single example that is hoping to illustrate like the overall potential and how much there is to be studied with these kinds of integrations.
Yeah, and I don't think you mentioned the one other benefit to honey locust is often their shape, their structure is the leaves are up higher,
Like a lollipop.
Yeah, more like a lollipop type structure, which helps the silvopasture in that the shade moves around a bit more.
And they can be colored, and then you have a perfect lollipop.
Yeah.
Sure,
And you can choose what height for what arc of how you spread the poop on that, because the arc
Yeah.
of the shade is how you spread your poop.
Yeah, exactly, and so that helps with also just with the success of getting enough sunlight down to the forages that are there as well.
Sorry. Yeah, no. And like not only the poop, but also the dew, right? Right, like as the shade moves around, like what it's allowing to happen that can't happen in an open pasture is for the dew to actually go into the soil because there's shade rotating around in this kind of patchy way throughout the day.
It's also, even though that's said in Norway, but soil law says that they pull up moisture and share it with the ground layer in a drought. So the trees that are interacting with the ground layer, a bunch of like things that they're doing to fertilize the ground. Just trees in general.
Yeah. Anyway, we're developing a couple of field trials in Southwest Vermont, like integrating a bunch of and in the Northern Monster Valley, integrating a bunch of this stuff. And I hope that in like 10 years I'll be able to bring a bunch of data on it.
10 years?
I mean, I think there's kind of like
We got to be planting today.
yeah, there's like well, yeah, you can decide how much of an early adopter you want to be, right? There's different parts of those systems that would only reach a level of production that would be like demonstrative at different like false indigo bush. It doesn't take 10 years before you can say, look how much feed it's producing at the impact on sheep health and all this stuff. I think to see like the net impacts of masting fodder species, that's more like yeah, at least 10 years probably.
So Mashachek in Austria says the first 15 years you develop a rich crown and then you start to tolerate.
Yeah.
And then you're not going to get a crop
Mm-hmm.
the size of the woman's lower arm or wine bottle, which is when you start pollinating.
Yeah.
So if you're hitting 60-year-old trees like I do, dropping these, you have immediate crop.
Yeah.
But planting, yeah.
Well, yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right. John, let's bring you right back into the conversation just to hear a little bit, and just to know a little bit more regional context, because I feel like that's exciting, but like you were in the process of kind of creating your silvopasture. I'm curious, like, what your challenges that you kind of faced in establishing it and like how you navigated. Because some people that are starting, like, what maybe like a little heads up on what
challenges are pretty obvious, and it was touched upon as the cows get it. It's just, as I was gaining that acreage into my pasture, it was unusable for at least the first 2 or 3 years, and that's when I obviously didn't know that I don't think the cows would have browsed on that buckthorn coming in per se, even though they like it, because there's really nothing else there. So until that grass develops, maybe I'll won't be as aggressive cutting the buckthorn down this year. But the challenge is obviously just getting through that slash, getting rid of the stumps, and then just reintroducing the sunlight and the moisture into that soil, and then working through those challenges. I think using that as my winter sacrifice area per se is I rotated them around daily, even in the winter, just to spread their manure and urine around, and the hay, obviously, to feed the soil. But I think that's kind of how I attack those challenges. But the big challenge is you're just not going to have the forage there initially right away.
Right. But you didn't have it before because it was wooded anyway.
Correct.
So
yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
patience.
It
You had to have patience.
But, and again, as Daimon said, one of the questioners said, oh, just put the cows in the trees. And that was my impetus to get this thing going, is to just greedily want more land. I also knew, kind of lost my train of thought there, but I also knew that in order to establish those forages, those cows would benefit by being in there as well.
And part of the reason for your success with making it past some of those challenges, especially for winter management out there, is it's a appropriate site for it in terms of soils. It's not overly wet for winter time that they're going to sink down in, cause damage to the roots of the trees and that sort of stuff. But you're also moving them around in there so you don't have concentrated impact. So the two things that I often see is people will see it as a wintering area and they just feed them there, and then the challenge with managing silvopasture is you don't often see the damage you've done immediately. It's usually a year or two later, and by then it's often too late to fully recover. Whereas if you're used to managing grass, if you see some bare soil all turned up, that wasn't good, but it'll fill back in. Maybe it's with weeds that you don't want, but it will fill back in. You don't have that immediate feedback with the trees in your system. So one of the major failures I see in silvopasture management is not being careful enough with the trees and the roots.
About introducing animals small with cows like sheep, they do the same damage?
Sometimes.
Well, they can, if they're managed in a way that creates that disturbance. There is less weight, so and
Push things over quite as easy.
what's that?
I said they don't push things over quite as easy.
Right. Yeah, they're not shoving things over. That sort of.
Unexpected examples. My friend Susan's milk sheep suddenly on a ash this big ate a huge area of root off of the bark and base.
Yep.
That tree had been there with them all those years. Like there's random.
Yeah. So.
You gotta watch what they're doing and be ready to.
Yeah, and the species of tree also really makes a difference. Like sugar maples really like oxygen in the soil because they have fine root fibers that grow up. And so if you compact that soil, you're gonna really damage those sugar maples really quickly.
All kinds of birches are also sensitive.
Yeah. So I think not to be someone warning you for things, but I just really I see it all too often that people are not aware of how careful they have to be about site selection and also the management of the animals under those trees.
I could just add a little bit of this from our experience in doing intensive rotational grazing of beef cattle and sheep in young orchard orchards between the age of 1 and 7. Elizabeth, who's over here, can speak in a lot more detail about her side of the beef cattle integration, but our experience has been both are totally feasible, and at least in our context, and there's definitely some challenges. I would say broadly, sheep are easier than cows because they're smaller, and we are like in her grazing system. There's polywire connecting every tree, and basically the cattle are being excluded from access to the trees. And there are certain ages where the trees are starting to form their canopy outside of the tube where you really can't, or you in order to put them in there, you would need to sort of accept a certain amount of damage because they're going to browse the forage that they can access.
Or that canopy higher than.
Yeah.
But 2 examples have told me their cattle will stand up on high legs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it depends how much they want.
Right. Black walnut's the other.
Yeah. Whereas we have sheep, we had feeder lambs this season in very delicate little hickory and chestnut establishment in 2-year-old trees, and we were making paddocks, moving them daily, and had trees included in the paddocks, and they with tree tubes. Yeah, definitely with tree tubes. Definitely with tree tubes. But we didn't see any kind of negative effect of that in our context in this case.
I don't know if somebody asked this question, but incidents of animals chewing on the bark, peeling the bark at some point in the season.
Yeah. The question was about chewing on bark and teething on bark or peeling bark. So we haven't seen that, but we haven't. Our oldest trees the oldest trees that we planted are 7 years old, and we still have tubes that we've made a vertical incision so they can expand with the tree. But basically, we're trying to keep that protection on there for as long as possible for that reason and for buckra. I mean, I think the idea of trying to put animals in direct contact with trees that you value without physical shelter is a really foolish idea.
And just the important thing is, so grazing the cattle, just like anything, and we learned early when we first put cattle into this system, the trees were young, but we were also had the mindset that we were the mowers, like our cattle were the mowers. That was bad for all reasons. And because 1, you're actually pressuring the animals too much to eat the stuff they don't want, and they're gonna go off the trees earlier. So as long as you're managing the animal, like, just let your cows go in and graze the top, with and they're not gonna bother the trees. Like, even when those trees were little, with different grazing management early,
For sure.
we would have had less damage. They would not even like look at that leaf up there, as long as it's good forage, but it was just because we were pushing them, and there was a lot of competition, so it's a lot about management.
Another thing that I thought, Liz, is that a big difference between, right, your field and the fields that we planted more recently, right? It's like our pasture, going back to the discussion of herbaceous pasture, like the quality of the seed mix we designed for the pasture is like 10 times better than what we did there.
We all, it's like, if we do this all over,
Yeah.
we have so many different things that we talk about.
So are you then having to do some mechanical mowing at a young tree stage?
Yeah, for sure. There was actually an image in there that I skipped, Nancy. If you want to go back to that, there was a page that showed like the view off the back of the mower. That one. So you can see we actually have been doing some experiments with this kind of like cyclical stripe mowing strategy where we're like subdividing. If people are familiar with like the chinampas, it's like dividing sort of production areas from bioaccumulation areas in stripes with as much edge between them as you can. So in this case, it's like in the areas immediately adjacent to the trees, the priority is more about managing competing vegetation. And then there's like a time offset between each stripe. So at any given time, you have, like head height, mature seed heads, you have the kind of habitat that forms in those, you have flowers and good, lush green regrowth from 3 weeks ago, and you have the stuff that you just cut, if that makes sense. So it's like you're maintaining all the different phenological stages of your herbaceous pasture system at the same time.
Was this a field before this was planted, or was this in the picture?
This was a dairy farm, and most of the in the aerial photo on the right, most of the fields were corn. So we seeded the pasture. Yeah.
Trying to follow up on that. What's your are you haying somewhere else? Do you guys have open land that you don't have? You're not planting trees on that you're haying in winter, or are you not fully grass fed, or is there even a potential to? Doesn't seem like there's enough space, but to run, like to grow.
To hay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can hay in there. I think Brad has hay.
So like
you would need to plan for
like
the
you guys, that picture, say you guys have sheep, but you're not the cattle. That's not where the cattle are. The cattle's on our. So we have 200 open acres that we can hay, but the trees are wide enough, and actually the 20 acres that are planted on our farm, 8 acres are 30 foot.
Which is
and then the 12 acres are 40, like 40 guests that are big equipment, anything to get rid of the cows are better in there. And there is a way you could make a system, like if we did our whole farm, like you would just make those rows much bigger and like have, you just have to do forage. But for us, having both the open land and the to graze really intensively in that is really good. We can do a lot of different disruptions. It's not always grazing. It's great. Like we can actually run a baler through there. And then actually to answer this woman's question about the one thing that you guys dealt with, like when we go in and graze, it would actually leave in between the trees. We didn't want the cows rubbing on the trees or messing with the trees. There wasn't management in between the tree rows. And that first winter, there was a lot of mold damage because basically we left like these rows of habitat for voles, and like this is their thing. This is the part that I don't know anything about. Like, oh shit, maybe someone actually needed to. Our cows cannot do that because we will wreck the trees, but that's mechanically you do need to knock some of that stuff back.
This photo is a photo of the opposite of what Elizabeth's talking about, where we're actually creating like stripes of vole habitat in the middle, or like alley cropping vole habitat to divert the voles. And it's a little too soon to say conclusively, but like our vole predation has gone down from a huge problem to like a negligible problem, concurrent with adopting this practice. I don't know if I can't say it's because of that. And I also, just to be clear about the hay question, it's like I don't know that I would. This is an experiment we're trying right now. like our orchards are way bigger than our grazing operation right now. I don't think that we would necessarily choose that pattern in areas where grazing was a higher priority, but it did work. You know, it's like if you imagine that pattern and then fast forward a month, like the areas that are brown there in August in the drought would be in September really nice, cheap forage, and actually having access to some of that like senescent material that a lot of grazers would look at as being like not so ideal in the middle of stuff that's already full of seed heads, like seems like they actually really like having access to it. So I don't know enough about animal health to argue about all the benefit, you know, to say anything conclusive about that, but that's my impression.
We're just about at time. I just want to like one last question for Daimon. Resources, if folks want to expand their transition into, can you just share some resources?
Yeah. So I guess there have been a number of ones mentioned today that are really great. One that hasn't been mentioned yet is the U.S. Forest Service has the National Agroforestry Center. They have a lot of great publications about all sorts of agroforestry. So I will just mention that. I don't know if there are any that you haven't mentioned. I think Shannon Hansen's websites are really good.
There's a new website too, so there's 2 of them right now. This is the last Sarah that I just finished has numbers.
Okay, so we can find out what the
Number 3 streams farm dot fix site site.com, and then you have to do / 3 streams farm again, and it's always the number 3, not
the word 3.
So 3.com
I think the book Coppice Agroforestry that you mentioned by Mark Krawczyk, who's also a sheep farmer in the Champlain Valley, it's a really great resource. I think the Carbon Farming Solution by Eric Tonsmeyer is a really good resource.
How about funding?
Funding?
Daimon, anything?
Vermont.
Daimon, can you say anything?
Yeah, trees for grazers, especially for planting. Austin Unruh has a lot of, he's interested in training people to have better success planting trees, because it sounds like it might be easy, but it's not.
Well, it's easy if you know how to do it.
Well, yeah, easy if you know how to do it, but you need to be prepared for irrigating it, or you know, things that you may not think about.
It's really easy to mess it up.
Yeah, really easy to mess up is what it's saying. So, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick plug. There's a fruit tree program. It's not strictly agroforestry focused, but a lot of the species have a lot of agroforestry potential for select counties in Hampshire, Massachusetts. They have flyers, so if you're interested.
Thank you. There are some options through NRCS for agroforestry support. They were a lot more heavily supported in previous years. We are adjusting this year, so I don't have a great clear answer before. I think it's worth having a discussion with your local NRCS.
Google, because there's some other ones that I can't think of names that'll pay you for trees, will pay you for tree protection for trees that do cover some of our areas.
Yep.
But I can't.
There are. I think there's. Yeah, there is some agroforestry funding. There's also you know, some conservation districts run some small grants. I think it just closed actually yesterday, but the fruit tree guys have fruit guys. Yeah, the fruit guys have a grant.
But there's another one, is it Appalachian something?
Appalachian Sustainable Development.
I think
Yes, that one's good.
the Nature Conservancy had a big program through the Climate Smart Commodities program, which was terminated with the whole Climate Smart Commodities program. But I just saw someone just sent me a job listing for the administrator that they're looking to hire to create for someone who wants to do that. So it seems like there may be a new successor program to the expanded.
There are several climate smarts that are transitioning to that new funding stream and trying to find ways to provide the funding that was there before for doing similar things, which agroforestry was a big part of all of that. So no details, but it's possible there's some money there.
But don't let funding hold you back, because
No.
if you get funding, you just fuck up bigger.
Yeah,
I will show you plenty of
that's it.
those.
You gotta have that 15 years. Let's get them in now.
Words to live by. All right, thank you so much, you guys.